Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Dennis Borosh, and today we're going to talk about Magnus Carlsen, the Practical. This game actually was played between Magnus and Maghsoodloo in the Speed Chess Championship. Now, this was a bullet game, but in chess, learning and thinking quickly does count for a lot. So if we take a quick look at this position, we might even notice white has already castled long while black castled short. That only means that white's long-term plan is going to go f3, g4, h4, and h5, just going for the attack, while conversely, black is going for a6, b5, rook b8, and b4, just trying to counterbalance white's plans. However, there is a concrete situation here, and that really what makes Carlsen the greatest, because he concentrates at the moment. And at the moment, there's a threat on d4 and pressure on this square. So what does Magnus do? Release the tension and immediately puts pressure on that bishop on g7. e5, good move by Maghsoodloo. He's trying to counterbalance white's aggressive move on the king side. Bishop takes, king takes, knight e2. But however, Carlsen again notices that the tension is good for him. He has the advantage, he has more pawns in the center, so it makes just more sense not to let it go. If white would go play d5, there's knight d4, and already black's not as much worse as in the case of knight e2. He takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop d7, f3. And it's not that Carlsen doesn't want to play g4, h4, h5, but first and foremost he wants to make sure that his opponent has no counterplay. f3, a6, what was just predicted, g4, rook e8, h4, h5, 5, knight g8. Here Magnus actually realized that the attack ain't going to pan out in case of taking, so he decided just to push the pawn and then just occupy all the important squares. And he's actually preparing ideas such as queen c3. Therefore, Maghsoodloo played king h7, just making sure that there are no nasty checks with queen c3. And this is a critical position, and even though it is a shorter time control in chess, probably the shortest on the internet, here white took a bit of a think, making an incredibly strong decision. So white must have been pondering how to continue. White already has some pressure on this square on f6, sometimes some pressure on f5, and eventually f4, f5 will be the plan, weakening the square on f7 and going bishop c4, bishop f7, and maybe later king b1. However, Magnus realized that f4 is a bit too early because there's pressure on e4. Bishop c4 would be an easy target right now to b5, so he decided, okay, you can't do anything useful just yet, so I'm gonna play king b1 now. It's a very good decision by Magnus. He makes sure his queen side is defended, everything's defended over there, and then he decides to go and decide what to do. Knight takes d4, queen d4, bishop e6, and now he plays f4 with the same plan, with his king already tucked away. c6, knight e3, c5. A good practical try by Maghsoodloo, trying to give away that pawn, but that pawn is poisoned. There's queen a5, and Magnus would be in big trouble. So obviously, Magnus didn't want any of that, played queen d2, and avoided all those tricks, also stopping this threat of queen a5, while his plan of f4, f5 is coming. Knight e7, it looks like it's been stopped, but not so. f5, even if black would take, it would just open up the position in front of the king, and that would lead to a big advantage, so Maghsoodloo was forced to go back to c8. Bishop c4, attacking the biggest weakness in chess, the f7 pawn, rook f8, rook f1, 5. And here comes the critical point of the game. So far so good, Magnus played magnificently. However, here he comes up with a practical decision that is of the heights of Mikhail Tal. I'm going to relax and chill a bit till you figure out a way to break through. Now, obviously, we can just go ahead and put pressure on the d6 pawn, but it is a short time control game, with both of the players having around 30 minutes for Maghsoodloo and 40-45 for Magnus Carlsen. So a practical choice can really put pressure on black. So, ready? Ready not? Bishop takes f7 was played by Magnus. Now, it might not be the objective best move, but with very low time on the clock, it's very difficult to defend this position with black. Rook takes f7, takes, king takes g6, takes, queen f2, king g8, queen f6. And on the surface, this might seem illogical. However, Magnus's plan is to get all of his pieces activated and go for a quick attack while all of these guys are still undeveloped. So here, Maghsoodloo is trying to get rid of this queen. Queen takes d6. Already, Magnus has 2 pawns for the piece, which is almost full compensation. And with the clock ticking, Maghsoodloo played bishop g4, which turned out to be a mistake. It seems, and it turns out, that bishop h3 is the right move, but even after that, g6, and there's still a raging attack versus the king on g8, rook g7, rook g1, and there are plenty of threats and all these pawns hanging, and with the king safely tucked away, this is just an advantageous position with white to attack. But Maghsoodloo buckled down with the pressure and sort of missed that rook f1 is quite strong here, and played queen d8. Queen g7 would have been an interesting idea, but Magnus's position is so good by now that even the positional rook f6 is very strong here. If black goes rook f8, just e5. If rook takes, that runs into the fork of ef, and you win a piece, or have and get good compensation. If you play knight c8, there's this very nasty little check. Rook f7 loses to g6 because it's pinned. And if the king moves to h8 or h7, in both cases there's rook h6, and the queen has to be given for the rook, which obviously loses as there is no back rank checkmate in this case. Knight would defend that square. So Maghsoodloo decided to play queen d8. However, he probably missed this very nice move, queen h6, and believe it or not, it's very difficult to stop this move g6 as the queen is not given access to this square, and there's no other squares you can really go to stop it. Played bishop h3, but that was already losing after g6. Black resigned as after bishop f1, there's queen h7, f8, f7, checkmate. So what is the moral of the story? So the moral of the story is, if you have very little time, it does make sense to go for Mikhail Tal like combinations and go for the practical choice. Be like Magnus Carlsen, the practical, or like Mikhail Tal. Thank you for watching, and have a good night or day wherever you are. Bye-bye.